Hello and welcome back to this CNBC Africa special. I'm Chris Bishop. Now, a big issue in these difficult days of COVID-19 is insurance. It's certainly a big issue and a big concern for many people, especially people who are struggling to earn an income right now. What's the best way to tackle it? Where's the best place to put your money? Now, with me to explain a little bit what we can do is Jurie Strydom, the CEO of Sanlam Personal Finance. Thank you very much, Jurie. Just give us a quick insight at the top of the show. You must have had a torrent of people coming to you in the last few months during this lockdown saying, right, I want to cancel my insurance, I want to change it, I want to cut back on spending. Just give us an idea of what you've had to deal with.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. So I mean, certainly that has been the case. I think all South Africans have been looking at their finances and trying to figure out the way to navigate through this. Obviously, people who've been employed and are earning a salary on a different position to people who've had their incomes reduced during this time. I think our approach, I mean, it does come down to a kind of a back to basics approach with most people, which is to look at budgets and cash flows and those kinds of old-fashioned things. I think most people are, if they're earning an income, they're trying to save more than they perhaps did before. We've also seen people wanting to have a look at the cover that they've got in place. And of course, that's what we do. So we would be talking to those clients and advising them on whether they've got enough cover, what sort of cover they need to take out, and obviously, ideally, keeping your cover if you can afford to do so.
So I'm interested in what you would say. If someone comes to you and say, look, I've been furloughed or I've been laid off for 3 months or 4 months, I want to cancel everything. What would you say to them?
I think that, look, it's so specific to the individual. So, that's why, advice is a regulated industry and we have people who are qualified and trained to give the advice based on the individual circumstances. But I suppose, I mean, the key things to think about are to maintain essential cover that you really going to have a look at what is essential cover that you've got in place. I think that's a key principle. And also to look at the different kinds of savings vehicles that you've got, the different kind of products you have, and to figure out there are mechanisms to save money in the short run by perhaps holding back on some of those commitments. But of course, ultimately, we all do need to continue to save. And so I think people would be encouraged to, as soon as they possibly can, to kind of resume those commitments.
Aside, I mean, obviously, your company as well has been through the mill in these last 3 months, like the rest of the economy. Well, what issues do you think your industry is grappling with at the moment?
So I think it's multifold. A lot of people ask the question around the kind of preparedness of companies like Sanlam for this kind of an event, and it's interesting because of course Sanlam was founded in 1918, which was 102 years ago, but it was the time of the last big global pandemic. So, in a sense, companies like ours are built to withstand pandemics, to be able to pay out claims when they come in. So we and others have got reserves generally for these kinds of events and have come through pretty robustly, I think, financially through this. The other impact is the economy and dealing with the impact on financial markets. Of course, our clients have got to deal with it. We also deal with that. But again, because of the regulatory regime that we have, which is quite sophisticated and robust, I think insurance companies have come through pretty strongly. And those that have published results, including Sanlam, have shown that from a solvency point of view and a liquidity point of view, being in a strong position. But I think if one looks a little bit longer term and you look at our business model, we advise people, we give people advice, and then we invest their money for them. And that process has historically been very much face-to-face. And so one of the big adjustments that we're making, and we're making it on the fly like everyone else, is to adapt and start to do those things digitally. And so I think that whatever we thought, digital transformation and adopting digital tools, all this was something that everyone was busy with, but it's now been dramatically accelerated in the last few months.
Well, there you are. Well, let's talk a little about innovation. I mean, I'm hearing what you're saying. I was reading a very interesting article the other day, how the Spanish flu pandemic from 100 years ago as you said, was almost gave birth to the life insurance and investment industry in this country. What innovations and what particular bits of business might come out of this COVID-19 pandemic we've got now?
Yeah, so I think we're starting to think about. I mean, insurance is a contractual business. You take out a contract, you pay your premium for a number of years, and then ultimately, eventually, you claim. And I think that the insurance industry is starting to innovate and think about how to adjust and how to make cover more flexible when people are going through problems of affordability. And it's complicated because, of course, the nature of insurance is that we underwrite people for their health up front. And so we've got to think about how does one allow flexibility in an arrangement like that so that people can reduce cover and then increase cover again without being penalized if their health has deteriorated. So these are the kinds of things that I think we're learning. I also think we're learning about how to engage with our clients digitally. And a lot of it is a design question that you've got to make things as simple and as intuitive as possible, make sure that it makes sense to someone who's looking at it, who's uninitiated. And I think that's also another positive that will come out of this.
Are there any particular challenges that you're facing in your business that are particularly endemic to Africa and peculiar to Africa at all that you're having to sort out at the moment?
Chris, I think that the big crisis here is around financial vulnerability of people, and I think that it's not necessarily unique to South Africa or Africa. It's any developing economy. I think where people do not have accumulated savings, where they're in debt, and they've got tight cash flow constraints. I think this is the challenge with a crisis like this. I heard the president say last night that it's been 80 days where people who've been impacted have been out of income, and so that I think is a particular challenge, and it's down to the individual to try to see. And of course, in the South African context, people have got multiple people who depend on them. They've got dependents that they support. So for every employed person who's earning a salary, you've got a network of people and loved ones that they support. So I would say that makes it particularly acute in South Africa, and all the more important that we find ways to innovate and to navigate it.
And so we're coming to the end of this particular show, but also hopefully someday when it comes to the end of lockdown restrictions. What did you think last night? The President Cyril Ramaphosas, he went and spoke to the nation and he relaxed things a little bit. Casinos, restaurants, non-contact sport will all be allowed. As a person in the financial world, what was your take on it?
I think I think that as we've gone along in the crisis, it's become clear that that it's not a 1 month or 2 month problem, that it's a longer term problem. He spoke about months or years. If you think of it in those terms, then clearly we have to find ways of getting South Africa back to work safely. I also think we've learned more about what that takes. The basic things around social distance, wearing masks, washing hands, those things. I think we now understand that better, and it's been clear for some time that it is going to come down to trusting people's judgment and that people behave responsibly and getting that message out, and that's really the only way to really combat this and have South Africans get back to work. I've got great sympathy, and I think the sectors that he opened last night are, of course, big employers. He made that point. And of course, the point I made earlier around the dependency ratio, for every one of those employees, there's people who depend on them. I think it's understandable around trying to get this economy as open as possible. What we've got to do is, when we're not doing it because we're through the pandemic, if anything, we're still heading towards our peak, as we know. So, the onus is on everybody to get the message out around what staying safe means.
And just one last question I have for you. The traditional view of people selling insurance and financial products is, especially in many areas of this country where there is no bandwidth, there is no connectivity, is a man getting in a car or a woman driving across the country, knocking on doors, sitting down with people. How are you going to be able to do that in the post-COVID world? It's going to be very difficult, surely.
I think it's some combination. I think, like all industries, we've begun to figure out ways in which you can have meetings safely. There are ways of doing that, and we've got guidelines that have been put in place and in industry wide. I also think it's going to be a blend between those kinds of face-to-face meetings and more digital and using digital technology, which, by the way, I think clients quite like. I think it works for them. I think they enjoy it, and I think it's easier for them. So in some ways that I think the industry is changing, but I'm pretty confident that we're going to be able to make the adjustments.
Thank you very much indeed. That was Jurie Strydom, the CEO of Sanlam Personal Finance, and I'm afraid that's all we've got time for on this CNBC Africa special, looking at what happens to the world of insurance and finance in the lockdown. From me, Chris Bishop at CNBC Africa here, it's goodbye.